good morning, good afternoon, or good whatever day. Um, Larry Cheatham and I are experimenting here with something that we are calling Take Me to Your Leader. And this is for our Memorial Drive family, an interview with one of our shepherds, Larry Cheatham, who is Shepherd Deluxe. I just love getting to spend time with Larry. I love the conversations and I love the blessing and I love his pastoral spirit. So this conversation will be a mix of questions from family to what it's like to be an elder. So Larry, if it's okay with you, we'll just see how this goes.
Okay. Thank you for the kind words and good morning, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you as you're watching.
Yeah. So Larry, to start with, um, if Mrs. Cheatham or if your girls were on this recording and I were to ask them what do they know about you that others might be surprised by, what would they tell us?
Our daughters, Erin and Haley, would tell you that I am cheap. I don't spend money very often. We drive fairly old cars, for instance, and don't spend a lot of money on new things. Um, and the girls will talk about when they were little and still at home and they're out shopping with me or out someplace with me, the window would open suddenly and for no apparent reason. And I would be, yes, you can have that. And yes, you can have that. And yes, if you want that, you can have that too. And then just as quickly as that window opened, it would slam shut. And I would go back to being my cheap self that said, no, we can't spend the money. And so then back to reality they would go. Mrs. Cheatham would certainly nod her head at that and agree with them. It happened to her a time or two. And then she would also tell you that I'm not very funny. I told her one time that you used to laugh at my jokes and now you don't. And she kind of looked at me and said, well, you used to be funny and now you aren't. So uh, those are two things they would probably tell you. There's probably a longer list, but that's probably two I think of.
If I thought there was any chance of getting Mrs. Cheatham on this, I would love to now bring her on and ask what she would add to that. I feel like you're safe though. She's not going to volunteer for that job.
She probably won't, being the introvert. However, after watching this, she may insist on her own
Yeah.
time of rebuttal. Yeah.
Well, that she is welcome to that, and we'll bring. Is it Haley and Aaron? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So part two, watch for that.
Could be. Yeah.
So one of the things that I want to ask you about is when you were asked to be an elder.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody comes to you, and I don't know if it goes with them saying, "Hey, we have you before a committee." If your name has come up, I don't know how that happens exactly or how it happened for you.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get that message, we want you to be an elder at this church. What goes through your mind when that's said?
Uh, my experience, someone will walk up to you and tell you that the leadership of the congregation is considering installing new people, and they're going to put together a list, and it might be something along the line, I'd like to know if you would be willing to consider. It could be someone saying, we have put together a list and you're on it and we want to see what you would think about that. When that conversation occurs, it's very humbling,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also a big honor that someone would even put you on such a list, whether they went forward or not with that list and took you, to the next stage. It's just a tremendous honor that someone would think of you in that light. It's also rather humbling that someone would think of that, think of you in that way. Uh, just as a, for instance, back to parenting Aaron and Haley, um, as a dad, there are things that you don't do well. There are
Mm.
days that you wish you had the do-overs and all that sort of thing. Um, you weren't as nurturing as you wish you could have been on that particular day when they had a bad day at school or something like that. Um, or you said no to something that wasn't very expensive, and you saw the look in their eye of disappointment. And so you don't want people to think, well, he's now a shepherd, so he must be perfect,
Mm.
or he must be perfect in his spiritual life, and he must never have faced temptations, or the ones that he did, he slapped to the side, and it wasn't any big deal. Um, and he must have he must be quite the Bible student and have all sorts of Bible knowledge, and he must have, dozens upon dozens of scriptures memorized. Well, no, those things aren't true. So yeah,
So, so were those thoughts that you had of elders before you became one?
pretty much, pretty much. Now, um, the places I'm a preacher's kid.
Yeah.
Many people may not know that I'm a preacher's kid, and so um, the elders' kids always blamed us preachers' kids when they got in trouble. Um, and so I've been around elders' families and elders and all that because of my dad. But yeah, I looked at them as pretty special people. I don't know that I necessarily, Tim, would say I put them all on a pedestal, but there were guys that I looked up to um, as spiritual men. And so one of the things, when somebody asks you about something like this, there's somebody that may try to do the same with you. And it's like, oh no, let's don't do that with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Larry, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation was because I think um, our habit is either to blame the elders for everything. Maybe that's just the ministry staff. It's either to blame the elders for everything, or it's to assume they're infallible.
Yeah.
It's to assume that they don't have um, they didn't struggle raising their daughters.
Hmm.
Um, when a question comes up, they know what the exact answer is, and they know the biblical reason for it. So to hear you say that was on your radar of, oh, I hope people don't assume that about me,
Yes.
is very interesting.
Yes. Um, Back to being a dad, I never learned how to do girls' hair. And so there was a period of time where Sheila's dad was ill. And so she went back to Jefferson City, Missouri to be with him and her mom. And school was going on. So, and I had a job. And so getting the girls up and fed and dressed and to school and all that sort of thing, they didn't look as nice when Sheila was out of town as they did when she was home.
Yeah.
And so um, that was never my gift. And so their hair went pretty straight, maybe pulled back in a ponytail. But for the most part, they were clean and somewhat well fed, but perfect dad, no, no. And so um, I would want other dads of daughters like you. Um, if Carson showed up knowing that Kim was gone and she didn't look quite right, there would be no judgment from me on you.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that's interesting because I remember when Carson was in kind of the preschool kindergarten age.
Mm-hmm.
I could do her hair. I could put the pigtails
Oh,
in, and
oh,
and I mean she's 5,
mm-hmm.
and I loved it because while I'm doing it, we're face to face, and she's looking at me like I am her hero. And by the time she was 7, I couldn't do it. Like there was too much hair, and I just
Yeah,
so I look back on that as a very tender time of connection and value. So, but I feel for you
yeah,
getting to that age of this is not in Daddy's
yeah,
toolbox anymore.
yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, so, so was there anything else that made you nervous about stepping in
Well,
to the role of being an elder?
the fallibility issue is one of those things that I or Ron, C. David, Clint, Daryl, Steve, and I, none of us have all the answers. It's a beautiful thing to have different perspectives and talk things through and all that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, we're six people that have different perspectives, but we may not have the best decision on a topic, or the it may be a really good decision, but the timing of execution, you know, may be off. And so, just like people are in their normal lives, when you're in this kind of position, you're still not perfect, and you try to be, and you want to be, and the goal is leading people closer to Jesus. And the fear that I have is doing something that would be so grossly offensive that would drive people
Mm,
the other direction.
yeah.
That we would be the picture in their heads of why church is bad, why Jesus isn't to be trusted.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, man, that makes me feel really tender because I know those feelings.
Mhm.
Um,
As a minister, you have them too. Sure, you do.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember in Bible preaching school, if a preacher made a big blunder, sinful, anything that blew up, the question would be why didn't he quit before he blew up a church, before he caused problems? And of course, then his name is dragged through the mud.
Hmm.
And oh, you don't want to be that guy whose name is dragged through the mud. Um, look at look at the mistake that they made. So with that fear out there, um, why would you say yes? Why would you step into that?
Um, Mrs. Cheatham was a part of that, an encouragement. She didn't say no, if you will. Um, the fact that others saw that was encouragement to go do that myself.
Mhm.
A lot of prayer about that. Um, I feel like God has given me a lot of experiences to prepare me for this. Um, and so knowing as a youngster growing up, and seeing those things where people thought they were perfect, and oh, they're not perfect, seeing that, understanding that's going to happen,
Mhm.
um, wondering what were they thinking, knowing that people in the congregation are going to have that very thought about me, but knowing that that's there, and with God's help and others' help, you'll get through it, and it'll be okay. Um, may be a little messy, but knowing that you're not all by yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, so many questions that come up come up for me here. But what would is it worth it?
Yes, absolutely. What will happen is these blessings from God will sometimes come pouring in like a bucket of cold water dumped on a winning coach on the sideline. Sometimes it'll be very quiet. Um, you'll get a text message. There'll be a card that comes in the mail. There'll be a phone call. You'll be walking out of Sunday morning worship service and going to your car, and you think it's just happenstance, but somebody will be walking toward their car, which is parked next to yours, and they'll have something that feels random,
Hmm.
but it's not random, that you needed to hear this message and of encouragement. or, the proverbial pat on the back that
Yeah.
keeps you going and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
So do you have
And,
a
and
favorite?
then, and then, but not to interrupt you, but
No,
then
no.
there's also those things that if you start to get a little bit prideful and think you've really got this, there's always some of those same things that come and tell you, maybe you could have rethought that one.
Yeah.
And what were you thinking on that? And
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So,
So do you have a favorite piece, the thing that your role as an elder um, draws you into, something that you get to do that's just your favorite piece of being an elder?
um, I'm gifted as an encourager.
Mhm.
I do have some leadership and administrative gifts as well. And so those are the favorite things for me. Um, I feel like I can draw beside someone that's, for instance, lost a job. Um, my very first job, um, I was working for a Levi plant making pants,
Hmm.
and it was just a summer job. And they hired a dozen of us. And a week after I was there, they decided they hired three people too many, and I was one of the three that got fired.
Oh,
And it was just absolutely crushing, and I'll never forget that. I can't even hold a job for a week, and it was the first one, and all that sort of thing. Well, what happened was about 2 weeks later, a couple of the guys that they kept, they decided they didn't really need to keep them anymore, and so they called me and said, "Hey, would you want the job after all?" And I ended up working there for several years.
oh wow.
But I will never forget getting fired.
Hmm.
And at the time, it was really bad. But all these decades later, I still remember that.
Yeah.
And so, if somebody has that happen to them, being able to draw near and have walked that, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And so, encouraging them and helping them and praying for them and advising them on looking, that's something. Or a parent that feels um, like they failed. um, I love something Jenny Connell said a few years ago. She said as a mother, she didn't realize that telling somebody to put on a pair of pants would ruin their lives. and, and it's just so true. It's so absolutely true. And just, giving somebody some encouragement. They went to bed. Maybe they didn't go to bed with the bath, but they went to bed alive, and tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah.
And just helping parents along that way with encouraging word. Um, I feel like I'm gifted for that.
So is there anybody, specifically Memorial Drive, but if it's outside Memorial, that's fine. But I'm asking you to name drop here.
Okay.
Is there anybody that you think especially encourages you, that you think maybe they don't know what an encouragement they are to you?
Oh my. Um, this is going to sound trite, but virtually everyone.
Mhm.
Um, d- those little blessings that come um, in no particular order, but I'll start with you. There's always a word that you have at just the right time, Tim. Chris and Amelia May, Jenny, I mentioned her already. Linda Jones, many years ago, before anybody that I know of thought about me being in this role at Memorial Drive, said, I think you should be a shepherd. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Um, um,
She may have a little bit of profit in her.
this may be. Um, uh, my friend David House.
Mm.
Um, David is straight and blunt. Bob Harper is another. Charlie Fowler, um, Jana Fowler, Doug Townsend. Um, I think this is kind of funny, and I've never talked to Mary Ann Harper and Dana Townsend before, but Doug and Bob will tell me that now Mary Ann told me, or Jana Fowler told me, or Dana told me, now you don't be mean to Larry. Um, don't get kicked out of the congregation by what you're going to say to Larry. And so, indirectly, they're blessings to
They
me.
they've
Uh,
got your back.
they've got my back. But I love the people that come, and Kathy Mayer is another.
Mhm.
Um, Ron, Steve, Clint, Daryl, Clint. If I didn't mention Clint, the other five guys, they're sources of encouragement. Um, um, I love talking to Wes Miles.
Mhm.
Wes will ask questions and all that. Um, Gerald Lovett came and did some work on our house, and I got in a little bit of trouble from slowing down the contractor because Gerald had a couple of questions, and so I like to chat, and so
Yeah.
we talked for a while, and but I love those kinds of conversations that aren't planned,
Yeah.
um, but they lift me. So
Yeah.
Andrea Eller is just an absolute hoot, and I enjoy talking to her. I've had a couple of lunches and a breakfast with Scott Eller um, about things that really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
We man, those are a lot of names that
yeah,
came to your mind instantly, and it
yes.
just makes me think we're really blessed at
We
Memorial.
yeah, we are, and I need to mention the ministers.
Mhm.
Um, and I'll include Lita and Sherry as ministers,
Yeah.
ministering to me anyway, and everybody's tolerant of questions and what was he thinking kind of a thing, and always quick with a compliment, and it's just everybody's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good people and a lot of characters in
Oh
there.
man, yes, yes.
I feel like there are a couple of sitcoms just waiting to be written about the characters we could come up from getting
Oh
to
yeah,
know with.
yeah.
Well, you've covered this a little bit, but I was thinking about in the spirit of our discipleship questions.
Hmm.
Um, are there other events in your life that were great or not so great that you look back on now and you can see God's fingerprints for how He was preparing you for this?
Um, you know, talking about the fire and the building burning, God prepared me for leadership at Memorial Drive through my professional career,
Hmm.
being in the construction industry. And so there are a lot of things that I know from a contractor perspective that help us, kind of explain why does this take so long and what does this mean? Well, I have the ability because of having been in the construction industry for 30 years,
Uh-huh.
I can interpret and help people see and understand that somebody's not out to get us necessarily.
Uh-huh.
Also, in my professional career, I dealt with insurance companies. I was on the employer side, and so um, the insurance company was defending me, if you will,
Hmm.
from some liability claim, some work comp claim, some claim about a vehicle accident that one of the company employees driving a company vehicle caused. And so now working with an insurance company, but on the other side, I have a little bit of understanding and appreciation for what they think and how they think and why things take so long. Not to forgive them, not to say they're right, but I get it, and so I can add some perspective there, where I think that's been a help to some, if
Yeah.
not many, at Memorial, that having that perspective, having Shane Kaufman having a construction background. He started as an architect and then moved into construction in his studies at Oklahoma State. Having him and I can be looking at something and I think, Shane, do you see it the same way? And he'll say, yeah, or he'll put a little bit of
Mhm.
perspective on it. And so between the two of us, especially, I think that's good. So God helped me, Tim, to answer your question, but then also having somebody like Shane nearby is also provision from God.
Yeah, the piece about insurance, because I know that there were times that you were ready to, um, I won't say pull your hair out because that just doesn't, that's not a right thing for us to say, but
If
somebody's
we,
hair.
yeah, pull somebody's hair out.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But then you were
that
also,
deserved it.
yes,
Yes,
but
yes.
you were also the voice of reason to the rest of us that were getting more and more angry. So the work that you did there,
Mhm.
um, keeping the pressure on while not shooting anybody, while simultaneously not letting anybody else shoot anybody. Like that was
Yes.
really, I don't know if, well, I know you don't get paid, um, but you would deserve some serious hazard pay.
Well, thank you. We're not over yet or finished with that task yet, but we're close.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's a blessing to the rest of us. I did want to say I'm afraid there are different things that come up that I think, oh, I'll ask this question, but I don't want to forget. But I do want to say, you and Sheila are the encouragers that I think so many of us, just whenever we're around you, I've gotten to be in small group with you now twice, and it's just my favorite to get to be with you guys. And
you,
I love watching you encourage people that need encouragement, and I love watching you offer it to people that don't know that they need it. Like it's fun to watch you um, throw out opportunities, and you're okay if people follow up with you, and you're okay if, and this may not make any sense because I'm trying to not put the context out there, but you're okay to let people walk by without accepting what you're offering. And it seems to me like Christ going, oh, there'll be another opportunity. There'll be another chance.
yeah, yeah. Sometimes I hate it when they walk by, Tim, candidly, but maybe my time is not their time or God's time for that person and me to connect.
Yeah.
But I try to think of it being like a farmer, and I planted the seed, and I'll try to water that seed, but whether it sprouts or not, I'll leave that to the Spirit, and let the Spirit do that,
Yeah.
and try to stay out of the way myself.
Okay. So this is really going into left field here, but have we mentioned yet that you grew up in Arkansas? Have we?
I don't think we have.
Uh, I wonder, is that, do people know that about you?
I think many do. I don't know that everybody does. Um, but yeah, I'm an Arkansas hillbilly.
Small town farming community.
Small town in the middle of farming country, timber country. I grew up in southwest Arkansas,
Okay.
which is in a place called Arkadelphia, halfway between Texarkana and Little Rock on I-30, 35 minutes straight south of Hot Springs.
Okay.
And little town of 12,000 people, and it's probably 12,000 people today.
Huh.
Um, and right in the middle of the piney woods of southern Arkansas. Yeah.
Well, I've been thinking about you recently because I'm rereading one of my favorite novels that I probably read over 20 years ago, A Painted House by John Grisham. The,
Mm-hmm.
have you read this one?
Yes.
The of West Texas farmer, a woman told me, Tim, you got to read this book because this is my childhood. And she's a West Texas cotton farmer, but
Mm-hmm.
she said growing up listening to Stan Musial on the back porch picking cotton, she said that was her story.
Yeah.
So So as I'm reading it now, I've thought about you and wondered, okay, did I don't think Larry's from the Jonesboro area, so I don't know if there's cotton farming where you were growing up.
Well, the cotton gin closed when I was a little kid.
Oh, really?
And yes, yes, there was cotton fields when I was really little. A little bit about Arkadelphia. Nobody necessarily famous was from there or is from there. Bill Clinton, Hope, just down the road from Arkadelphia. And then I don't know how many people know David House and Mona Edwards are from Delight, and that's Glenn Campbell's home.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
and so there were famous people sort of around us,
Uh,
but not. But Arkadelphia would be somewhat like the John Grisham book, Tim, in the sense of it was quiet, it was sleepy. Um, it was St. Louis Cardinal baseball country, and I don't know why necessarily, but Cardinal baseball and Arkansas Razorback football, those were the two big deals down there. But you know, you got on your bike early in the morning and you were gone until the sun went down.
yeah.
Uh, just a idyllic time
Yeah.
that's come and gone. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, I think that's a good note for us to end on there.
Okay.
Unless there's anything else you want to say to close this out.
No, I find it joy to be at Memorial Drive. I love the people there. I love being on this journey of fires and flood and all sorts of things that have occurred to us. Um, and yet we're walking right through it and trusting God and just pulling the inspiration from others has been a marvelous thing for my spiritual walk. And I hope to help others in theirs, but I want people to know that they're helping me with mine,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
with their perseverance and steadfastness. So,
Man, it thank you for saying that. It just feels like we are a part of a blessed place. Like with the
yes,
names that you've mentioned, it just feels like, yeah, this is a journey together. And each one brings their giftedness and brings how they reflect Christ.
mhm,
So it feels like, okay, the journey ahead is we're going to be okay. Um,
yes, yes,
we're on this journey together, and Christ knows where we're going.
yes. He's got this
Yeah.
without a doubt. Yeah.
Well, I feel really grateful that you would step in as a pastor of this church. One thing that we didn't talk about, well, let's talk about this next time about eldering and leadership. Like
Okay.
how do you allow Christ to be the pastor and be the shepherd and the leader, and while playing the role of his representative as the pastor of the church? I mean, those are biblical things, but how does that work? So,
You want to talk about that a little bit now?
well, what would
Or
you
do you
say
want
about that? So, anybody who is about to get off, count that as a push pause
to-
and then push play. Yeah.
yeah. Um, Going back to Southern Arkansas, something that I learned, something, this goes back to your question, Tim, of something God did in my life to prepare me. Um, this is 1965, and I'm 13 years old. And so, those of you trying to do quick math, I was born in 1952. And, and this is a time of um, separate but equal. Schools are segregated, public places are segregated, and all that sort of thing. And 65 was a time in our country when things became really pretty heated and serious, not unlike today, where a lot of things are going on, emotions are high, and all this sort of thing. And a couple of things happened. And here I am, a 13-year-old boy, a preacher's kid, and not really understanding what's going on. But I remember something very, very clearly. There was Southwestern college in Texas had been, their basketball team had gone to Nashville, Tennessee and played Lipscomb. And they were going through Arkansas, heading back to Texas on Sunday morning. And they had called a congregation that they thought they would be close to when worship service started. That's down the road from Arkadelphia ways. And they called them and asked if they could stop. And the church told them no.
Mm.
And I remember my dad didn't, he didn't react. He didn't act in a big expressive way, but I remember his disappointment in that congregation. And that just struck me, and I found that interesting. And of course, 13 years old, I'm not really introspective. Some would tell you I'm not very introspective now, but certainly wasn't then. And then a short time later, in that same year, a lady wanted to start attending there at our congregation with her daughter. And our church had been very cooperative. There was an African American congregation in town. And during the summers, I remember having tent meetings with them, kind of on the proverbial unofficial border between one side of town and the other. But we'd never gone into each other's buildings. And I remember this very vividly. She wanted to come worship with us, and something had happened, and she didn't want to worship with her side of town, if you will. And I remember there was a church meeting of everybody 21 and older to talk about that, and it was unanimous to invite her to come. And I asked my dad about it not too terribly long ago, and I asked him if there was any fight or what was the vote, and he told me it was unanimous. And I said there had to have been some disagreement, some fight, and he told me that the only fight was over who was going to sit with her, so she wouldn't feel alone. And this is 1965, and I think that's what Christians are supposed to be. And that's what the church is supposed to be. And small town Arkansas, probably not much different than small town West Texas. You have a Church of Christ, you have a First Baptist, you have First Methodist, and maybe a Christian church or a Catholic church or a Lutheran church. The fourth one is optional, depending on the town. But everybody else was kind of like, what are you people doing over there? And kids would ask you on the playground or in the hallway at school, what is this about? And it was an interesting time for me, but it was something this 13-year-old boy looked at and absorbed and said, that's what we're supposed to be about. And so rolling forward, to answer your question, that's kind of the benchmark for me. And trying to think about, here's someone that's lonely, that's an outsider, that our society many times they're an unseen person, undesirable person. And one of the things I love about Memorial, we don't care what somebody looks like. We don't care if they're churched or not churched, and it could be setting us up for an awkward moment or two, but we don't keep the doors closed because somebody doesn't look like us or believe like us. And for me, that came from being a 13-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. And I love that about us.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not hard for you to imagine watching that play out has affected the decisions that you make down the road.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that event impacted me not only in spiritual life, but personal life, professional life. Yeah,
Mm.
that was a big deal. I cherish that looking back on it. Again, at the time, it was confusing and I didn't have a context, and I just knew this was clearly different, but I didn't grasp how different.
You mentioned talking to your dad about it recently, more
Mhm.
recently. Um, was it discussed around the table as a kid,
I-
or was it just done and family moved on or church moved on?
Back to not being very introspective, Tim. I don't
Yeah.
remember asking a lot of questions.
Hmm.
Um, Now, my parents, they never necessarily had secret meetings or anything like that. They never brought the church junk home, you know,
Uh-huh.
and dad never criticized anybody personally. And so I don't want to leave that impression with you or anybody else. But I don't remember that they talked about it that much, but I do remember it being talked about,
Yeah.
and and I remember dad being proud of the congregation,
Yeah.
but I don't know if he expected, you know, the unanimous opinion of we welcome her or not.
Hmm.
Um, but uh, yeah, I didn't ask. I'd have loved to ask a lot more questions, and that was partly why I went back to him to ask him about it again, because I was just curious about what his perspective was this many years later.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's fascinating as a history student that you lived in that time in that place.
mhm.
1965 Arkansas. That's not a story I would expect.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, it wasn't. Um, uh, it wasn't something, you know, today we look at that and say, wow, how could that be? I look at that and say, wow, look how far the society has come, how far the church has come,
Yeah.
um, and,
Mm.
you know, proud that those things have been redeemed and we're better.
Yeah.
I often wonder some too, though, Tim. I wonder what's happening today that we'll look back. Our, you know, those 13-year-old kids that are here today will look back on in 50 years and say, wow, what were they thinking? Did they realize, you know? And
Yeah.
I hope there's not many on their list, but
Yeah.
certainly not like that one.
It's coming.
Yeah,
It's coming.
yeah, yeah,
Well, thank you for sharing that.
sure.
That uh, is is really neat, and it makes me wish I could talk with your dad.
I can give you his number sometime, and
All right.
yeah,
I may.
absolutely.
Is he still in Arkadelphia?
No, he lives in Little Rock now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, very much retired, but yeah.
I think that I have a friend in Arkadelphia.
Do you
Um,
really?
yeah,
Well,
somebody that I've known from Conway, Arkansas, I think has moved to Arkadelphia.
how? Well, Maddie Curtis is in school down there now at
Really
Henderson
is.
State. Yeah, she's down there on the women's basketball team.
Uh-huh.
Um, I have obviously with COVID and everything and her gone, I haven't had a chance. I look forward to sometime when she's home asking her, how is it in Arkadelphia? Um,
Now, was Henderson State around when you were growing up?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a 4-year school,
Okay.
small. I don't know what they, Division 2, I think is the term now in
Yeah.
terms of athletics and all that sort of thing. Yeah, yeah.
Very interesting because you chose to go to
Well, I
Searcy.
did, full disclosure, I went 2 years to Henderson and
Oh,
then
okay.
my last 2 years to Harding. So,
I didn't
yes,
know that.
yes, yeah. Henderson was hometown, and um, went on scholarship. Um, to really show my age to some people, it cost $150 a semester for tuition, and I
Man,
was on full ride, baby. So
wow. Wow.
times have changed there too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Henderson, Harding, uh, and I noticed your ringtone
Mhm.
when your phone went.
No,
They're neither Henderson or Harding on your ringtone.
no, that's a whole nother story that I'd be happy to share with people in another recording.
Well,
So,
we don't have time for that.
yeah. You Texas Tech people especially don't want to hear it, do you? Yeah.
Right, right. There's not time to talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, Larry, thank you for I I said I wouldn't use the word guinea pig anymore,
Mhm.
but thank you for experimenting here. And I hope that for our memorial body, for anybody that stumbles upon this video, that you'll be encouraged. That we have pastors like Larry that are serving our body. We are
Thank
blessed.
you. Thank you, Tim. See you, everybody.